Welcome to In Case You Forget, a podcast for foster care caseworkers who carry more than anyone sees. If this work feels heavy and follows you home, this is a space to process, reflect, and remember why you said yes. I'm Jami Cabe.
And I'm Jami Finn. We're so glad you're here.
Today, we are so excited to introduce you to LaQuisha White. But before I do that, I want to let you know that Jami Finn is not able to be on the show today with us. So we are going to miss her for sure. But LaQuisha, it's great to have you on.
It's great
Now,
to be on.
let me introduce you to our listeners. LaQuisha is the Director of Foster Care at WinShape Homes, where she leads program operations and partners with churches to support foster and respite families through a trauma-informed approach. Previously, she has served in a variety of leadership roles across foster care and mental health, where, among other things, she has overseen social services and supported both clinical and administrative teams in foster care and adoption. Known for her steady leadership and deep care for people, LaQuisha is passionate about strengthening systems while keeping children, families, and frontline workers at the center. Now, in this episode, we're going to explore how frontline workers, regardless of title or authority, can meaningfully influence the culture around them and what to do when you don't feel supported by your supervisor. And we're going to go through much more than that as well. But LaQuisha, welcome to the show. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you, Jami. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, I just want to know, before we really dive into some more specifics here, where did your passion for foster care work come from?
Wow. So I think it was more so just a passion for social services and really wanting to serve in some way. I was previously, right out of grad school, I was a therapist for kiddos that were in therapeutic foster care. And so I had a lot of opportunities just to speak with them and their families and to see a little bit kind of on the outside looking in how the system worked. And even back then, I really felt that there was a passion or a pull to really want to help these children to get them reunified with their families. And then if that wasn't the possibility, to really help their foster families that they were with, whether that was going towards adoption. So initially, really more so just kind of started off with the passion for mental health and social services. And then that switch with foster care. I truly believe every child deserves to be in a loving home. They deserve to be with a loving family. Any way that I can possibly do that, I'm all for it. I feel like that we all have a part to play in that.
Well, that's wonderful. You've been in leadership roles where you've overseen a lot of foster care workers. And we know that every agency has its own culture, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Let's just talk about how culture is built and how we can actually build a culture of care within an agency. You know, we're not necessarily speaking to foster care leaders right now. We're speaking directly to the caseworker. And so a lot of times maybe it's their first time they've had a job out of college. And they're probably like, well, how could I ever influence culture? What do I even have to do with this? Let's just talk to them, kind of their part that they can play.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like those frontline workers and those folks that are in the homes every day and serving families and serving children, they are the biggest influencers of cultures because they are the ones that are out, their boots on the ground, they're in the homes, they have the most interaction with children, the most interaction with families. They're the ones that are in court. They're constantly on the road. Any culture that you have built within your four walls at your agency, these are the folks that are going to be examples of that once they leave the agency or once they leave that building. So for me, I feel that with those people that are doing this hard work, honestly, it's kudos to them because a lot of times folks don't really understand unless you have been a case manager or if you've served a family in a certain capacity. Sometimes you don't understand what that looks like. So it goes beyond our policies. It goes beyond what we put in place, the compliance kind of things. It's really, what do we want to do here? Who are we serving? It's servant leadership. How do we want to serve well? And I think that our folks that are going out into the homes and that are serving kind of the boots on the ground people, they're the ones that are influencing the culture the most.
I have a wonderful grandpa figure in my life who he'd always talk about being an energy giver. And he loved energy givers. And it just makes me think, what are some ways that our caseworkers can be this even in times when they're in roles that are actually not very energy giving.
We all talk about self-care, but that's a real thing. I mean, honestly, it's like, what does it look like when you're in the office? And do you have a supervisor? Do you have an agency that's pouring into you? How are they influencing you? How do you take what you have received in that culture that has been built out into the world, into those that you're serving? And so I think that we all have to identify what are those ways that we can draw energy from others. If you feel that you're supported, you're going to know it. I think we all know when there's a person that's having a bad day, if they're not, if they're low energy or if they're feeling like they're not being supported, you can see that in their work. You can see that in their face and everything that they do. And so I feel that the way that we as leaders pour into those folks and the way that we outline what culture looks like, those are going to be the biggest things that are going to be able to pour into those folks and really be able to give that energy. You can't give anything that you don't receive or that you don't have inside. And so for all of us, if you're talking about those energy givers, I think that those people that are doing this work every single day, they just need to be able to be supported and be held. I think honestly, sometimes for lack of a better word, just, someone who can really be able to hold a really safe space for them. So that way they feel that they have a person they can go to and that way they can pour more so into their kids and their families.
Mm-hmm. And
Mhm.
speaking of the supervisor, speak
Yeah.
even a little bit more to maybe practically speaking,
Mhm.
as they do have the opportunity, even more so maybe to shape the culture or to build some rhythms. As you're in leadership, you get to like build out the systems of
That's
support, like
right.
you said.
Mhm.
So, what would be some key systems of support for those foster care leaders listening?
Yeah. Well, I will say that it's more than that open door policy. It's an open hands policy. It's an open heart policy. If you are interacting with people on a daily basis, you can see their heart in the way that they talk about families. I've talked to my team about this also, just saying, if we're in meetings and if we're discussing cases or discussing kids, like there are real image bearers behind those cases. So, how are we talking about our families? How are we talking about those biological families that are struggling, that are having to go to court and have to meet all these things in a case plan in order to be reunified with their children? And so, we should really have an open posture. Now, the thing about that is that that's not something that you can just turn on every day. It really is a personal thing. It's your personal relationship with Christ. It's your personal relationship with
Mm,
your faith, with those that are in your life that support you. And so I feel that as leaders, we have to work to make sure that that culture is in place and then it trickles down, honestly, to those that we're working with. So my door is always open. And that's kind of the visual part of having an open door policy. But
mm-hmm,
my folks know that they can come and they can talk to me and we can sit and I can support, even if we disagree on something, you
mm-hmm.
still have a very supportive space. And just knowing for anyone that they can come to me and they can talk to me about a policy or they can talk to me about something they're struggling with a family member or the court system or the state. I mean, all these people that are involved in this, we're all
Mm-hmm.
people. And so we understand that, but we also have to make sure that we have some really supportive systems that are in place for each one of us individually.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not asking for specifics here, but just
Mhm.
what are some of the kind of themes of things you're
Yeah.
hearing
Mhm.
from those frontline workers, the common struggles, the common
Yeah,
concerns?
I would say that for us of working at a faith-based agency, one of the common things that we see is because we are not the custody holder of children that are in our care, we have to work alongside the state. And so I would love to think that everyone that is involved in this has a very common goal. We want to see children reunified with their families, but the path to get there is a winding road and there's lots of twists and turns. And I think that sometimes we can feel very protective of our areas and very protective of the work that we do. But I also think that if we're able to build those relationships from the very beginning, from the time that we have a child that comes into care or the time that we start working with a family, just really understanding and putting the message out there that we're in this together, that we want to see reunification when it's safe for children to go back home, that if there is something else that we can do, if we can lend an extra hand, if there's something extra that we can do, that's what we wanna do, and so, even though there are some times where we have had a bit of conflict in the past with whether it's the state or with someone like the defects workers or folks that we work with, I think it's just overall just understanding that we have to have that open dialogue. At our agency, from the very beginning, we have a child that comes into care, we're sending a little package to the defects case managers to say, "Hey, this is who we are. This is what's important to us. This is how we're going to make your job easier. And I think that's the thing. It's like when you're working with folks that are not in the state, they feel like it's more of a burden and it can feel like it's just more things that they have to manage or take care of. And we don't want that. We really want to say, we're coming alongside you to make your job easier and to really just be able to speed up the process for kiddos to be able to go back home and for them to be able to find permanency.
When you talked about how we want to make sure we are supporting our frontline workers, not every frontline worker is receiving the support, certainly outside of the agency, but sometimes not even inside the agency. And I'm just curious what guidance you would have for the frontline worker who is not feeling supported by their supervisor. What can they do about it?
I think you find your why. Why are you in this role? If you wake up every day and feel passionate about it, then you're already 100% there. If you can feel passionate about this work. Where I think it gets a little difficult is that if you have a situation where you don't feel supported by your supervisor, a lot of times we don't feel like we have anywhere else to go. So what does your support system look like outside of work? When I mentioned earlier before, just talking about that open door policy, if we can sit together, and if you are creating a space where I can bring a concern to you, or if I can talk to you about a concern that I have, that I feel goes a long way. That's just the first step in a long line of things that we can do to be able to try to just have a supportive relationship. And again, it's one of those things where it's not something that changes overnight. This is truly just like who we are inside. It is, who are you as a person? Do you want to be able to build new leaders? Do you want to be able to pour into the system? And so even though I know that it's really difficult to have those conversations, I've had to have those conversations before with supervisors before. I feel like, there's no way to sugarcoat it. We can just sit here in the office or we can go outside the office and let me just tell you how I am feeling. And then I think as a supervisor, you have to be able to take what they are saying. And even if it's something that you disagree with, let's have an open dialogue. And I think that sometimes when you're working with the state, you feel bound sometimes by the policies and the rules. And that can be really hard. And so I think that if you are able to cultivate relationship and build that relationship from the beginning, that makes it easier to have those difficult conversations later on.
When you're working in a private agency, how much overlap is there with folks in the state agencies?
There's tons. There's tons of overlap. Even as a private agency, we would be able to place children in foster care even if we didn't have that contract with the state. So because we do have that extra relationship with the state, then that just means that there's more folks that are involved in this constellation of care when it comes to finding permanency for children that are in foster care. So our case managers, they are in constant communication with the defects case manager or the state case manager. So every family will actually have two case managers, and a lot of folks don't know that. So we try to coordinate our visits with them. We have conversations with the supervisors, with other regional directors, just depending on the counties that we're working with. They are constantly having conversations with the CASA workers and the guardian ad litems and all of those folks. So that's why I mentioned before that those boots on the ground folks are the ones that are really driving your culture, and they're the examples of culture because they're the ones that are having the most conversations with those specific counties when we have kids that come into care.
Okay, so let's talk specifically to those workers. You're involved in lots of conversations with CASA, with the state, with your own supervisors.
That's right.
That just alone, having all of those, that's just on top of all the other things that you're
That's
doing.
exactly right.
How do you navigate, especially when you're already depleted, but you're feeling like I'm struggling to communicate well or to feel heard or to feel like this child is being heard? How do they lean into that? And what do you do with that when you're just like, I feel like I'm just talking and no one's hearing?
That's a tough one, honestly. And I've been a case manager before, so I know that when you have lots of people that are involved and you want to be the mouthpiece and you want to speak for the child, but you also want to advocate for your foster families and you want to advocate for the birth family. At the same time, you understand why the state has made a certain decision, but it's hard to try to express that to a family that's struggling with the decision that's made. And so I think for me, having been in that situation or been in that position before, it truly just goes back again to my faith relationship and what self-care looks like for me, understanding that when it comes to trauma-informed care, that the children that you're working with, they may struggle with certain things, but we have to approach everything from the lens that these are children that through no fault of their own are in foster care. And they're working with a lot of people that may be faith-based or maybe not be. And so I think that for us, that the folks that are working, the frontline workers, And I think that for them, whatever they can possibly do for self-care is extremely important. And then also being able to have, again, that culture that's surrounding them. We have heard that there's high turnover when it comes to the state. And a lot of times it's because there has not been the effort put into developing that culture and developing the opportunity to be able to pour into those frontline workers. And so if we can recognize that this is really important work that we do, if we have a supervisor that's supportive, and then at times, if you're able to leave work at work, and I'm saying that, but I know it's easier said than done. But if you're able to leave work at work and be able to find those things outside, find those things that are really supportive, those self-care things for yourself, I think that goes a long way in being able to pour into the work that has to be done on a daily basis.
You mentioned they're advocating for foster parents, they're advocating for parents, they're advocating for kids. How do you as a worker prioritize or know like how to advocate for these different groups? And then you probably have your own bias that you're trying to throw out the door, but yet it's real. I mean,
First and foremost, it's advocacy for the child. When we are looking at permanency and when we're looking at, or when we're working with children that have had experiences with trauma, that is it's paramount to everything else. Like that is my ultimate driver. What can I do to make sure that this child is safe? What can I do to make sure that they are in a loving home? So even though it may be difficult, you may be hearing some things from the foster families, or the foster families may disagree with some decisions that are made. It's what is best for the child. We have seen situations where children have gone back home and they've been reunified and had to come back into care. For all of us, like we're trying to make decisions that are truly life-changing decisions. We're not always going to get it right, but this is generational stuff. The work that we're doing with our kiddos, it has an impact on them. It can have an impact on their children, their children's children. So, the same way that trauma affects those generations. And so if we have the
yeah.
ability to be able to truly, have some the life-changing work that we do, I think that's our ultimate driver. But it gets extremely hard. And there are sometimes where your hands are tied. And honestly, I can't speak to certain things because there are some times when it's a state decision and the state has to make a decision depending on, recommendations from attorneys and other people that are involved. I think that you just have to do the best thing that you possibly can, the best that you possibly can to be able to support the child that's in care and make decisions that are ultimately for their permanency and their safety.
Yeah, and you just got to keep going back to that.
Yeah.
And I also know that as frontline workers, often, like you talked about, there's decisions that are made. You don't actually get to make those decisions, but you do have to cascade those decisions, right?
That's exactly right.
So give some help on when you have a hard conversation that you have to share with a child or with a family.
Sure. I think that if there's a decision that's coming down, let's say from leadership or from your supervisor, I think that I think everyone should be able to express any disagreement with the decision. Again, that goes back to the open door, open hands, open heart. We can have a conversation about it, but because they are the mouthpiece for it, I think that if you've already poured into that relationship with the child, and if you've poured into that relationship with the family that you're working with, that can sometimes soften the blow, even though we know that it's really difficult work. And so that's a lot of weight on your shoulders. Honestly, you think about being a case manager, you could go and do anything else and probably make more money and maybe have less stress. And so if you feel really passionate about that, I mean, it's kudos to you because you're in this work. But understanding that when you have situations like that, when you have to express those messages or pass on those decisions to families, I think that pouring into the relationship in itself, that goes a long way. And so even though everyone may not be 100% on board with whatever decisions are made, I think that we have a good relationship. And if we understand that it's for the best interest of the child, then that in itself is one of those things that can kind of soften the blow. And then afterwards, everyone needs to make sure that they are taking care of themselves. We're looking at self-care, secondary trauma, all of those things. What are the ways that you can try to make sure that you have that extra support that's in place? And that's for families, and it's also for those frontline workers too.
Right. That's what is hard, but also true is nobody is going to tell you to take care of yourself
That's right.
necessarily.
That's right.
Like, so we have to take up that responsibility.
That's exactly right.
And that's so hard when you're feeling so depleted. That's why building some relationships outside of stressful times that can support you seems really important.
That's exactly right. Honestly, it's, what does that relationship look like? Who are those people in your life that can support you, whether it is at work or if it's outside of work? Is it your
Mhm.
faith family? Is it your actual family? Is it your friends?
Mhm.
That's why I say, we throw around the term self care, but that's a real thing. Like, what can I do to care for myself? Even if we all sat down and just identified 2 or 3 things that we can do. If I know that I've had a stressful day, I may not feel like it, but I know that going for a walk is really helpful for me. Or it may be binge watching a show or anything, like just something fun to do. But truly, it's that self care that's in place. No one can tell you what that looks like for you. And so we actually have to do a little bit of reflection on our own to figure out what are those things that we can do to try to decompress after a long day. And again, try to pour into ourselves. And if that's your faith, if it's prayer, like I know for me, like that's a big one. I just have a conversation with God in the car if I'm driving on the road or if I'm on my way into work or in between a meeting. And so what does that conversation with God look like? Or for anyone else, what are those little things that you can do throughout the day to try to help yourself with that self care?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned something with the walk. You might not feel like it, but you know it's good. I think that's a really important thing to think about on reflection is like, what are the things I do that actually fill me up? Because there's certain things I do that I think are filling me up, but they're actually not. And there's certain things I do that, it's just so often, it's just the way it is. So many times the things that feel harder in the moment are actually better for us.
That's right, and a lot of times it's those things that are just so hard to do. It's like, I don't feel like doing it, and honestly, you feel worse after you do it. And so, even though I know I should go for a walk or I should probably eat this salad or whatever that looks like for those things we're supposed to do, sometimes it's like, again, it goes back to identifying really what that care for yourself looks like. And if we take the time and the energy, we can probably come up with a lot of different things that specifically work for us in those times.
Yeah. How do you recommend? Because again, I could hear someone saying, I don't have time to think about that. What would you say to that?
I think there's always going to be a time where you don't have time to think about something. That's just the nature of the work that we do. This is 24/7 work. There are always conversations or emails or texts or phone calls, things like that. And so I think that you don't have to have an extended amount of time to be able to focus on that. That's not required. You don't have to spend an hour or two. It's really just finding those little moments throughout the day or at night when you're laying down to go to bed or waking up in the morning. Can you take a couple of minutes to yourself? Can you take a couple of minutes just to reflect, for me on God's glory and just say, thank you for allowing me to be able to have another day where I get to do this work. I don't know what the day holds, Lord, but I'm going to trust you in those relationships and trust the work that I do and the work that you are doing through me. And so I think that, again, you don't have to have that pressure to have this itemized thing. It truly can just be whatever you can do to take 5 minutes to yourself or 5 minutes to be able to pour into yourself in some way.
Yeah, I think so often we jump from one extreme to the other, right? I mean, I know it's so easy to do.
That's very easy to do, especially I think in this work. You're constantly trying to find those things. When you're talking about self care, finding those things to make yourself feel better or to feel like you have a place or you have a voice. And that's why I say I think that it's a long term process, but everyone that's involved, if we all collectively just worked on those ways that we can try to build relationship better, then eventually we really will get there where we're able to work really well together and be able to support each other well.
Yeah, that's a big one is
Mhm.
relationship, relationship,
That's
relationship.
right. Yeah. That's exactly right. That connection, that's
Yeah,
huge in
the
this work.
connection.
All of us need it, whether we know
Yeah,
it or not, or whether we agree or
yeah,
not. We all need to have that connection, and we need to have that relationship.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I know that when you're feeling stressed
Mhm.
and pulled
Mhm.
and again, it's one of those things that feels harder to
Yeah,
lean into, but it's
that's right.
so important.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I think that for all of us, when I mentioned before, a lot of these things, like, it's difficult to answer questions, say, oh, just do this. This is all you have to do, and everything will be fixed. This is not that conversation. And the reality that we have in the work that we do and working in social services and this life changing work and life giving work that we do, really just understanding that it will take a little bit of work and take some time to get there. But at the same time, it's absolutely doable.
Yeah, I've heard it said growth is not linear.
That's right.
So as you're
Mhm.
trying to grow, you're going to have ups and you're going to have downs,
That's exactly
but
right. Yeah.
But when we're uncomfortable, that means
Mhm.
we're actually growing often.
That's
Like when
right.
we're pushing through those things that are uncomfortable.
Yes. If that's the litmus test, then I've experienced a lot of growth over the
Yeah.
years because we've had some
Exactly right.
uncomfortable situations just sometimes where it's
Yeah.
like you don't know
Yeah.
what to do. And that's a
Yeah.
hard place to be. That's a really hard
It
position to
really
be
is.
in where it's like, I don't really know if I can speak into this. And so that's why it's like, I think that with that relationship and with that connection, as long as you have that open door and you hope have that open posture, I think it just it trickles down to your team. And I think your team feels better when they can bring something up to you. And I think that within their teams, they even feel better about the conversations that they have to have. And then outside of that, then they're able to have those conversations with the state. And if we are examples in the work that we do, maybe we're influencing someone with the state to say, hey, I think I could have that conversation with my supervisor too. I'm, working with some people who believe in the Lord and they believe in the work that we do. And so we have an ability to really kind of influence the entire relationship of all those that are involved and foster care specifically.
So, one thing you said kind of struck a thought for me because we're talking about building relationships and we're talking to supervisors, but we're also specifically talking to the frontline workers, those case managers. Obviously, they can work to build a relationship with their supervisor and they can work to build relationships, of course, with their clients. But how do you kind of hold this, or how do you know how to hold boundaries? Like when you're building relationships with your client or the families, what do boundaries look like in those situations?
Yeah, boundaries is one of those things where it's extremely important in the work that we do. I think that we all want to feel trusted. We all want to feel valued in the work that we do, but we also want to be able to make those hard decisions when hard decisions have to be made. And so if you're outlining your boundaries, it's a matter of just being very clear in whatever it is that you need. And we can have a conversation where you can express to me, these are the things that I'm okay with, the things that I'm not okay with. And then for me as a case manager or frontline worker, it may be that you put some boundaries in place when it comes to communication with the family or communication with your supervisor. Those late night emails that feel like I have to answer this at midnight. What does it look like? And this is just a conversation that we can have tomorrow in the office. And so just making sure that we're putting those boundaries in place, really that's a form of self-care in
Mm-hmm.
itself. And so when you're carrying a lot and when you're in a situation where you feel stressed, I think it's really important to be able to say, hey, these are the things that I'm comfortable with, and these are the things that I'm not as comfortable with, putting those boundaries in place. And I think that there's a lot of beauty in that everyone. Again, this is
Mm.
the long term goal. Everyone should be
Mm-hmm.
absolutely okay with that. For someone expressing their boundaries to me, I should be absolutely okay with that. This is what
Mm.
you need for your family. This is what you need to be able to get up and do this job on another day.
Yeah.
So, me as a supervisor, how can I make sure that I am supporting you and
Yeah.
outlining those boundaries?
Yeah. We're not machines.
No, not at all.
We are limited
Sometimes
humans.
that's right. Sometimes it would be easier, or maybe not. I know
Yeah.
with technology these days, maybe
Yeah.
it wouldn't be
Right.
easier if we were machines, but because we're living, breathing people and we
Mm-hmm.
have families and we laugh and
Yeah.
we love and we want connection and relationship and all of those things, we're also faulty at times. And so sometimes you can really feel like you can't express those boundaries, but expressing those things and being able to put those parameters in place and having those open conversations, that is what is sustainable. And that's what keeps us in the work that we do. And that's why when you don't have boundaries in place, when you don't feel like you have a supportive supervisor, when the culture is not supportive, then that's when you get burnout and you feel like you're just kind of on spinning a wheel every single day and not moving towards safety and not moving towards permanency for kiddos. And you're not seeing reunifications and those really loving moments that we live for in this work. And so that gets really, really hard. So how can we, whether you are, very new to working in this field or if you've been in this field for a really long time, I think having those boundaries in place and really identifying the ways I need to be cared for, that goes a long way.
I want to ask one final question because I'm
Sure.
just thinking for new workers coming in
Mhm.
and they're very excited and passionate and
Yeah.
ready to make a difference. Like
Mhm.
they feel that call, right? They
Yeah.
feel that passion. What is like some of the key advice
Yeah.
you might want to give to them?
Yeah. I would say that for anyone who's brand new into this work, you want to make a difference. The key thing to remember is that you will make a difference. just by being in the life of a child, having that relationship with that child, building that relationship, being a supportive person, that again is life-changing work. You will make a difference in the life of that child. It may not be that the outcome, the big outcome when it comes to permanency or whatever that looks like, that may not be what you want to have for that child, or it may not be what everyone agrees on. But you yourself, individually, and the relationship that you build with those that you support, it's actually, it's one of those things where, again, you're pouring into that child and you are changing their life. So you may not always see those outcomes. It's not linear. It's not from A to Z. You're going to have lots of twists and turns. You're going to have a lot of journey in that. But in that journey, are you learning during that time? And then with those that you're working with, are you able to pour into those kiddos that you work with? I have kiddos that I still am in contact with after, oh goodness, 15, 16 years, getting photos of kiddos that are graduating from high school. And so it's like that in itself, it may not, again, be that A to Z pathway we took together, but at the same time, it's like they still remember Miss LaQuisha was there. Miss LaQuisha came to my school for this, or she was there to advocate for me. And that in itself, even if it's just one child, you've made the difference in the life of a child. That's a beautiful thing. That's beautiful work.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Mhm.
Man, thank you,
You're
LaQuisha, so
welcome,
much
Jami.
for
Yeah,
sharing
my
with
pleasure.
us. If this episode reminded you that you are not alone in this work, share it with another foster care caseworker who may need to hear it. And remember, your work matters, and so do you.
This podcast was edited by Resonate Recordings.